He braced for a loveless arranged marriage until the bride's veil drop stopped his heart. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The boardroom was so quiet that even the hum of the air conditioner felt loud. Rows of polished mahogany reflected the tension hanging in the air. And standing at the center of it all was Ethan Hale, 35 years old, disciplined, sharp-jawed, impeccably dressed, and very clearly furious. He did not raise his voice, but every word carried weight. "You cannot force me into this," he said, his tone flat enough to cut glass. Across the table, his uncle folded his hands calmly. "It is not force, Ethan. It is responsibility. If you want to maintain control of Hale Dynamics, this marriage is the only way to secure the merger. You know that." Ethan's fingers curled at his sides. His entire life had been built on disciplined control and earning what he had. But now the empire he had built was being leveraged against him over something as personal as marriage, an arranged one, to a woman he had never even met. His jaw tightened, but he refused to let anyone see the storm beneath the surface. A legal folder slid across the table. The attorney opened it with a practiced flick, revealing pages of terms and signatures waiting for ink. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. A loveless marriage, a business contract disguised as tradition, a commitment made not with desire but with pressure. His mother's face flashed through his mind. She was still in the hospital fighting a long, exhausting illness. If he refused this deal, the board would vote to remove him. He would lose the company. He would lose the power to protect her. He exhaled slowly, barely audible. "What are the terms?" he asked. The lawyer cleared his throat. "5 conditions, Mr. Hale. Both parties must appear together at 5 major public events as spouses. No interference in each other's personal lives. No physical expectations of any kind. The marriage lasts 1 year, and the true purpose of the union remains confidential." Exactly what he expected. A marriage built on boundaries, not affection. Ethan nodded once, a small, resigned motion. "Fine. Bring me the pen." He picked up the heavy silver pen with a steady hand, but inside something twisted. A quiet ache. A memory. 3 years ago he had been deeply, truly in love with a woman who said all the right words until she saw an opportunity to step higher. She traded him for a senator's son without a second thought. The fallout had hollowed a part of him he never allowed to show. Love was not only unreliable, it was dangerous. He pressed the pen to paper. A signature, a contract, a promise without a heartbeat. Only when he finished did the lawyer add one more detail. "The bride will remain private until the ceremony. It is a request from her family." Ethan looked up sharply. "I do not get to meet her. No, sir, not until the wedding day." A slow, cold breath escaped him. Perfect. A marriage built on anonymity. Exactly what a man who no longer believed in love deserved. He closed the folder as if sealing his fate inside it. Across the room, the board members began murmuring, already discussing press statements and merger logistics. To them, the deal was done. To Ethan, it was a cage he willingly stepped into. He walked out of the boardroom without another word, his footsteps echoing down the marble corridor of the Hale Tower. Outside the windows, the Manhattan skyline glowed with late afternoon gold, but he felt none of its warmth. He pressed a palm to the glass, staring at the city he had conquered through grit and discipline. "A loveless marriage," he muttered under his breath. So be it. But deep beneath the hardened layers he had built to survive this world, something faint flickered, a question without a voice, a hope he refused to admit, a whisper lodged in the quietest corner of his heart. And he had no idea that the one moment designed to be cold, formal, and emotionless, the moment when the bride lowered her veil, would shatter everything he thought he knew about fate. Part 2 will begin exactly where his unwanted wedding day unfolds. Let me know if you are ready for the next part. Ethan Hale had always believed he could control his own life, but nothing prepared him for the reality of preparing for a wedding that felt more like a corporate strategy than a celebration. The following week moved with a strange heaviness each day, carrying him closer to a future he had agreed to only out of duty. His schedule shifted overnight. Meetings with designers, etiquette consultants, public relations managers, and lawyers began filling every hour. A team arrived at his penthouse one morning, rolling in racks of tailored suits, polished shoes, and boxes of cufflinks. They took measurements, adjusted collars, and pinned fabric, while Ethan stood still, detached, watching the city through the glass wall behind them. He could almost hear his uncle's voice again. "This marriage is what will stabilize the board. You are doing the right thing." But the right thing had never felt so wrong. A soft knock pulled him out of his thoughts. Mrs. Layton, the family's longtime event coordinator, stepped inside with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Hale, we need to begin your rehearsal," she said gently. "The ceremony will follow a modified structure. You will walk in after the officiant, then wait for the bride at the altar. There will be a moment designated for the veil removal. The families want it to be symbolic." Symbolic? He almost smiled at the irony. A groom who did not believe in romance participating in symbolism. He followed her to the private ballroom rented for the event. Rows of chairs were being arranged, florists weaving white roses and lilies into long garlands. The scent was soft but persistent. Someone adjusted the lighting overhead, warm gold filtering down in perfect symmetry. Ethan walked to the altar step by controlled step, imagining how the real day would feel. A marriage to a woman whose face he had never seen. A partnership built on rules. A union built on pressure, not desire. "Hold still," Mrs. Layton instructed. A stylist pinned a small microphone inside his suit jacket, adjusting the lapel. Another tested the sound system. The officiant walked up, rehearsing lines with steady, practiced diction. Then came the unexpected part. "She will also have a handler," Mrs. Layton explained. "Her family requested minimal interaction until the ceremony. She is being escorted through a separate entrance. She has her own preparation team." Ethan's brow lowered slightly. "Is she nervous, Mrs.?" Layton hesitated. "I believe so. She asked that the rehearsal be done without her presence." He nodded, but something shifted in him. A small stirring of empathy. Whoever this woman was, she was also being drawn into a marriage she had not chosen. The rehearsal ended, and Ethan returned to the hallway. On his way out, a figure hurried past him, just a blur of soft movement. A woman in a pale dress, her hair loosely pinned, carrying a box wrapped in protective cloth. She kept her head low, nearly colliding with him before stepping aside quickly. "I am sorry," she whispered before disappearing through a side door. Her voice was gentle, nervous, and it lingered in the air long after she was gone. Ethan paused, watching the door close behind her. He could not explain why something about that moment pulled at him. Perhaps it was the fragile tone. Perhaps the way her hands trembled. Perhaps the familiarity of someone else trapped in expectations they did not choose. He shook the thought away. Back in his penthouse that evening, he loosened his tie and sat on the edge of his bed. The city lights glowed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, glittering in a pattern he had always found grounding. But tonight he felt adrift. He looked at the contract again on his nightstand. The black ink of his signature stared back at him, stark and irreversible. A loveless marriage. A predictable future, a safe, controlled plan. So why did that fleeting encounter echo inside him like a quiet knock on a locked door? He let out a slow breath and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would take him closer to the ceremony, closer to the unveiling, closer to the woman whose face he would see for the very first time. And he had no idea that the moment their eyes met would break every belief he had about what love could be. Part 3 will begin at the final preparations before the wedding day, where tension begins to shift and fate starts to take shape. The morning before the wedding arrived with a cold, pale light seeping through the windows of Ethan Hale's penthouse. He had barely slept. His body was exhausted, but his mind refused to quiet. Every hour felt heavier than the one before it, pulling him closer to a ceremony he had agreed to but did not desire. He stood at the kitchen counter, stirring a cup of coffee he was not truly drinking. The city buzzed below, unaware that one of its most powerful men was about to enter a marriage built on signatures rather than affection. A soft alert chimed on his phone. Final preparation, 12:00 p.m. Car arrival, 1:30 p.m. Ceremony, 4:00 p.m. Time was no longer moving. It was marching. By late morning, the preparation team arrived. Stylists, tailors, and coordinators filled his home with quiet efficiency. Jackets were pressed, hair trimmed, and every detail refined until Ethan looked exactly as the family needed him to look, controlled, polished, unshakable. But inside something shifted. A small persistent echo, the sound of a woman's gentle apology from the hallway rehearsal. That brief tremble in her voice, that moment that felt far too human in a process that had not allowed him a single ounce of humanity. He pushed the thought away for the 100th time, but it clung to him like a shadow. When the limousine pulled up, the coordinator opened the door and said, "Mr. Hale, it is time." The ride to the venue was silent. Manhattan streaked past the tinted windows in a blur of color and movement. Ethan's reflection stared back at him in the glass, his own eyes colder than he remembered. He arrived at the private estate chosen for the ceremony. The gates opened to manicured gardens, marble fountains, and tall stone archways decorated with white roses. Everything looked perfect, perfectly arranged, perfectly controlled. He stepped out of the car and adjusted his cuffs as photographers prepared their lenses. The media had been carefully limited, but enough were present to signal importance. Inside the estate event, staff stood ready. Someone guided him toward the groom's preparation room. As Ethan entered, he heard hushed voices coming from an adjacent corridor. "She is trembling again," a woman whispered. "She said she feels like she might faint," another responded softly. "She is trying to stay composed. This is overwhelming for her, too." Ethan slowed. The words pierced through him in a way he did not expect. The bride, the woman he had not met, the woman forced into the same fate as him. For the first time, he felt the weight of her fear as strongly as his own. He closed the door behind him and stood still for a long moment. His reflection in the mirror no longer looked like the emotionless executive he had forced himself to be. There was something new there: concern, curiosity, a quiet ache he could not explain. Mrs. Layton entered holding a clipboard. "Mr. Hale, we will begin the final microphone test now. The officiant will join you shortly." He let her adjust the small device beneath his lapel as she continued speaking. "You should know," she asked for a moment alone before walking to the aisle. She wanted time to breathe. Ethan hesitated. "Is she all right?" Mrs. Layton looked at him, surprised that he asked. "She is trying her best. That is all I can say." Ethan nodded slowly. He was not sure why, but he wanted to know more. Wanted to understand the woman behind the veil. Wanted to know what had pushed her into this life-changing contract. When the preparations finished, Ethan was instructed to stand in the hallway waiting for the signal to enter the ceremony room. The doors at the far end would open for him first. He waited there, silent hands clasped behind his back. Then from the opposite hallway he heard soft footsteps. A woman's silhouette appeared briefly, a small frame moving carefully guided by two assistants. Her face was hidden beneath layers of delicate veil. She did not see him. But the moment she passed, he heard it again, her quiet breath uneven and fragile. Something in Ethan's chest tightened unexpectedly. For the first time since signing the contract, he whispered to himself, "Who are you?" The signal finally came. A coordinator stepped forward and gently opened the double doors. "Mr. Hale, it is time." As he walked inside, the music began to swell, and every guest rose to their feet. The aisle stretched long and gleaming beneath the soft gold lights. He took his place at the altar. The veil would drop soon, and without knowing why, Ethan realized his heartbeat was no longer steady. Part 4 will begin at the moment the bride enters the room carrying the secret that will change everything he believes about fate. The ceremony hall glowed under warm golden lighting as Ethan Hale stood at the altar, shoulders squared, expression composed, every part of him appearing calm to the guests, who watched with polite curiosity. But inside his pulse was no longer steady. It beat in sharp, unexpected bursts, tightening his breath every time he imagined the woman behind the veil entering the room. A soft chord from the string quartet filled the air. The hush that followed was almost reverent. Then the doors at the far end opened. Every head turned. Two attendants stepped forward, first carrying the edges of a long ivory train. Behind them, moving with careful, almost trembling grace, the bride appeared. Her dress was simple but elegant, made of soft white satin that caught the light like water. A delicate veil draped over her from head to waist, obscuring her features completely. Ethan had expected to feel nothing. This was a business arrangement, a contract, a strategic alliance. But the moment she stepped into the hall, something inside him shifted with a quiet, startling force. She was small, almost fragile in the way she held her hands tightly together. Her steps were steady, but her shoulders carried a tension that suggested she was fighting through nerves with every inch she walked. He remembered the faint voice he had heard in the rehearsal corridor, the apology, the trembling breath, the way she moved past him without lifting her gaze. It had to be her. The guests watched with admiration, whispering about the elegance of the ceremony and the prestige of the Hale family. Cameras clicked softly. The officiant straightened his notes. Ethan watched only her. When she reached the front, her attendant stepped back. She stood just one step away from him, close enough for him to sense her nervous breathing beneath the veil. Her hands trembled. Instinctively, quietly, Ethan lowered his voice and said, "Take your time." Her breath caught as if she had not expected him to acknowledge her fear. She nodded slightly, and for a fleeting moment he felt the smallest thread of connection. Two strangers standing together in a place neither of them had chosen, bound by forces larger than both of them. The officiant began the ceremony. "Today, we gather to witness the union of Ethan Hale and his bride in a commitment promised before their families." Ethan listened, but his attention remained fixed on the bride's quiet, controlled breathing. There was something about her presence that stirred an emotion he thought he had buried years ago: concern. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for, and now the officiant said the bride may lift her veil. A soft stir moved through the guests. Ethan felt the air thicken. The bride's hands rose slowly, almost hesitantly, touching the edge of the delicate lace. But before she lifted it, something happened that caught him entirely off guard. Her hand faltered. The satin glove slipped slightly from her fingers. It was small, almost imperceptible, but Ethan noticed. She was overwhelmed. She was afraid. And suddenly the man who had walked through life with ruthless precision felt something unfamiliar, an urge to protect. Without thinking, he stepped 1 inch closer and said softly, "It is all right. You are safe." Her shoulders loosened at that single sentence. With a steadying breath, she lifted the veil. The lace drifted upward, catching on a beam of warm light. As it slowly revealed the face beneath, Ethan inhaled sharply. It was her, the woman from 3 years ago, the woman who had helped him in the pouring rain when he had been stranded on the side of a rural road, injured and shaken after a minor car accident. She had been the only person who stopped, the only person who offered comfort without asking for anything in return. He remembered her eyes, instantly soft, warm, deeply human. She looked up at him now, with those same eyes filled with fear but also quiet strength. The entire room faded from his awareness. All the business expectations, all the pressure, all the resentment for the forced marriage. Everything else dissolved the moment he saw her face. The world narrowed to one truth. He knew this woman, he trusted her, and fate had brought her back in a way he never saw coming. She whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Hello, Ethan." His heart stopped. The ceremony, the merger, the contract, nothing mattered for a breathless second, because the bride was not a stranger. The bride was the one person who once showed him genuine kindness when he needed it most. Part 5 will begin at the shock that ripples through Ethan's thoughts as he confronts the truth behind her presence and the real reason she agreed to this arranged marriage. Ethan Hale stood frozen at the altar, every thought colliding at once. The woman beneath the veil was not a stranger chosen through business contracts or family negotiations. She was the same woman who had helped him 3 years ago on a dark rural road when he was injured and refusing to show weakness. She had stayed with him until help arrived, offering nothing but compassion. Now she was his bride. The ceremony moved forward, but for Ethan everything else blurred. Guests watched politely, unaware of the shock spreading through his chest. His breathing felt shallow, almost unsteady, as he tried to process the impossible. When the officiant continued the vows, the bride lowered her gaze, her voice quiet but steady as she repeated each line. Ethan watched her closely, studying the curve of her expression, the tension in her shoulders, and the way her fingers nervously clasped the bouquet. She was frightened, but she was also brave enough to stand there. He remembered her name now. Lily Ward. After the vows were spoken and the officiant announced the symbolic completion of the union, light applause filled the hall. Lily released a small breath as if surviving the most intense moment of her life. When the guests shifted toward the reception area, Ethan leaned slightly toward her. "Lily," he said quietly, "why did you not tell me it was you?" She held the bouquet a little tighter. "I did not think you would want me here. Everything happened very quickly. Did you choose this?" he asked. Her eyes lifted to his. "Not exactly. My family pushed me into the arrangement. They needed the financial stability your family offered. And when I saw your name on the documents, I was shocked. I tried to decline, but there was pressure from every direction. Ethan listened carefully, an ache forming at the center of his chest. She had been trapped, too, not by ambition, but by circumstance. "And you," she asked softly, "you look like you were carrying a weight I cannot describe." "I was," Ethan admitted. "I still am." Silence settled between them. Not cold, not distant, simply honest. It felt strange to stand in front of a woman he barely knew, yet somehow trusted more than people he had known for years. Her presence alone softened a part of him he thought had hardened forever. "Mrs. Layton approached with a gentle smile. "The photographer is ready for the first set of portraits. Congratulations to both of you." Lily managed a polite nod, but her hands were trembling again. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You do not have to pretend with me." Her eyes softened at that. "Thank you." They moved to the courtyard garden where the photographer arranged them under an arch of lilies and pale white roses. Ethan lifted his hand to adjust the placement of hers, but he paused before touching her, giving her space. When she gave a small nod, he gently settled her hand against his arm. A simple gesture, but it grounded her. He could feel the tremor in her fingers ease. Flash after flash captured the moment, but Ethan hardly noticed the camera. He was focused on Lily, on the truth behind her quiet tension, and on the unexpected surge of protectiveness rising inside him. When the photographer called for a brief pause, Lily stepped back, taking a breath of steadying air. "I am sorry if this complicates things for you," she murmured. "It does not," Ethan said. "It changes things, but not in the way you think." She looked up, puzzled, but before she could speak, a familiar voice cut through the air from across the courtyard. "Well, well. Ethan Hale actually went through with it." Ethan turned sharply. His cousin Marcus stood near the entrance, smirking with thinly veiled contempt. The same cousin who had been pushing for Ethan to lose control of the company. The same cousin who would benefit if Ethan failed. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Marcus's eyes slid to Lily. And this must be the bride. The mystery woman who arrived out of nowhere. Lily stiffened instantly. Ethan stepped in front of her without hesitation. Part 6 will begin with the confrontation that threatens to expose the truth behind their forced union, and the moment that forces Ethan to choose whether to protect her publicly for the first time. Marcus's steps echoed across the courtyard as he approached, each one dripping with confidence he had not earned. Ethan Hale kept his posture straight, but the muscles in his shoulders tightened. The last thing he wanted on this already overwhelming day was Marcus's presence. Marcus gave Lily a dismissive glance, his smirk deepening. "You must be Lily Ward," he said, as if her name were an inconvenience. "Quite a surprise. No one on the board even knew who you were until this morning." Lily lowered her eyes, her knuckles tightening around the bouquet. Ethan stepped forward, blocking Marcus's line of sight. "Marcus, this is not the time, or the place." Marcus ignored him. He lifted his voice just enough for a few nearby guests to hear. "Interesting choice, Ethan. I expected someone from a more compatible background. You know, someone who actually understands our world." Lily's breath hitched. That was the moment Ethan felt something inside him snap. He had endured pressure, manipulation, and expectations for weeks. But watching Lily shrink under Marcus's words awakened a protective instinct he did not expect to feel so strongly. He took one step closer to Marcus, lowering his voice to a controlled, cold edge. "You will not speak to my wife like that." The word wife hung in the air between them. Real, solid, final. Marcus's smirk faltered. "Ethan, relax. It is a simple observation." "No," Ethan said evenly. "It is disrespect, and I will not allow it." A few guests nearby noticed the tension and subtly backed away, sensing a confrontation. Marcus's eyes flicked around the courtyard before landing back on Ethan with irritation. "You are letting emotion get in the way of business," Marcus muttered. "Maybe that is what you would do," Ethan replied. "But I will not." There was a brief standoff, a silent battle between two men who had spent years circling each other in the corporate world. Marcus broke first, clicking his tongue in annoyance. "Fine. Enjoy your little celebration. But we both know this marriage will not change the board's doubts." Ethan's expression hardened. "Leave." After a tense pause, Marcus scoffed and walked away, muttering under his breath. When he was finally out of sight, Ethan turned back to Lily. She stood perfectly still, eyes lowered, her breath unsteady. Her hold on the bouquet trembled again. He softened immediately. "Lily," he said gently. She looked up and there was something painfully honest in her expression. "I am sorry. I did not mean to cause any trouble." "You did not cause anything," Ethan replied. "Marcus behaves like that because he thinks he is entitled to everything. This is not your fault." "But I do not belong in this world," she whispered. Ethan hesitated, surprised at how deeply her words affected him. "Neither did I at first," he said softly. "I built my place here. You will not have to do that alone." Her eyes widened slightly, as if the idea of someone defending her was foreign. Mrs. Layton hurried over, breaking the moment. "Mr. Hale, Mrs. Hale, the next set of guests is ready for greetings. The reception will begin shortly." Ethan nodded but kept his gaze on Lily. She steadied her breath and gave a small, brave nod of her own. Together they walked toward the reception hall, their steps tentative at first but gradually aligning. Inside, the chandeliers glowed like constellations. Soft music drifted across the room. Guests turned to greet the newlyweds, expecting polished smiles and perfectly timed gestures. But as Ethan placed a guiding hand at the small of Lily's back, something shifted. Not for the guests, not for the cameras, but for her. She leaned ever so slightly toward him, just enough to show she felt safer at his side. For a man who had walked through life believing he needed no one, the realization hit him quietly but undeniably. This marriage was supposed to be loveless, a transaction, a strategy. But in this moment, with Lily close enough for him to sense the steadiness of her breath, Ethan felt the first fracture in the cold walls he had built. Part 7 will begin when an unexpected revelation surfaces at the reception, threatening to tear open the truth behind Lily's past and forcing Ethan to face the depth of his growing feelings. The reception hall shimmered under soft amber lights, the kind that made every surface glow gently. Guests circulated with glasses of champagne, offering polite congratulations as Ethan and Lily moved through the room together. To anyone watching, they appeared composed, elegant, and perfectly in sync. But beneath the polished surface, a quiet tension trailed Lily like a shadow. Ethan noticed it immediately. The way she stiffened when someone approached too quickly. The way she kept her hands clasped together, as if trying to hold her nerves in place. And the way her eyes drifted toward the exit every now and then, as if she were afraid something might follow her. He leaned slightly toward her. "If you need a break, we can step out for a moment." Lily shook her head gently. "I will be all right. Thank you." Yet the tremor in her voice said otherwise. Before Ethan could ask again, Mrs. Layton approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Hale, we need you for a brief conversation with the investors near the front table. They insist on greeting the couple together." Ethan sighed silently. He wanted to stay with Lily, but he nodded. "We will be there shortly." They moved toward the main table where several influential board members and investors waited. Cameras flashed softly, capturing every movement. Ethan maintained his calm expression, answering questions and offering firm handshakes. Then one of the investors, a tall man with a sharp suit and sharper tongue, turned to Lily. "So, Mrs. Hale," he said, swirling his drink, "we know Ethan's background well, but we admit we know almost nothing about you. Where exactly did you come from?" The question sliced through the air. Lily's grip tightened around her champagne flute. Ethan stepped in. "Her background is not a matter for speculation." The investor chuckled lightly. "Oh, come now. For a marriage of this scale, transparency is important. We simply want to understand the family we are partnering with." Lily tried to speak, but before she could respond, another voice cut in from behind. "I can answer that." Ethan turned sharply. A middle-aged man stood near the entrance, breathless from rushing eyes fixed directly on Lily. His expression was tense, almost frantic. "Lily," he said, "we need to talk." Her entire body froze. The hall seemed to grow quieter, as if the music softened just enough for the tension to take shape. Ethan stepped between them immediately. "Who are you?" The man swallowed hard. "My name is Daniel Ward. I am Lily's older brother." Lily's eyes widened, a mix of shock and dread flooding her face. She had not expected him. Not today. Not ever. Daniel looked past Ethan, searching Lily's expression. "You did not return my calls. You disappeared the moment the arrangement was finalized. I had to come because there is something she has not told you." The guests began whispering. Cameras subtly turned in their direction. Ethan felt his pulse tighten. "This is not the place." Daniel shook his head. It has to be said. You deserve to know why she agreed to this marriage." Lily's voice finally broke through, fragile and desperate. "Daniel, please stop." But Daniel continued the words, tumbling out under the pressure of worry and guilt. "She did not do this for herself. She did it to rescue our family, to pay off the debts left after our father passed away. She sacrificed her freedom for all of us." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lily's breath trembled. Her eyes shimmered with humiliation and pain. Ethan turned toward her slowly, the truth landing like a heavy stone in his chest. She had not entered this marriage for gain. She had entered it out of love for her family. She had taken a burden she never should have carried alone. Part 8 will begin when Ethan makes a choice in front of the crowd that will determine whether this moment becomes her shame or her protection. Silence spread through the reception hall like a slow, heavy wave. The guests who had been laughing moments earlier now stared with wide eyes. The music softened to a faint hum, drowned beneath the tension settling thick in the air. Lily stood completely still, her breath trembling as the truth of her sacrifice spilled out in front of dozens of powerful strangers. Daniel's words hung between them all, raw and unfiltered. Ethan Hale looked at Lily first, really looked at her. Her shoulders were shaking. Her fingers clutched the silk of her dress as if trying to hold herself together. Her eyes shimmered with humiliation she did not deserve. Daniel tried to step closer. "Lily, I never wanted to expose you, but you left me no choice. You are carrying everything alone. You need to." Ethan lifted a hand sharply. "That is enough." Daniel stopped mid-sentence. Ethan turned slowly, stepping in front of Lily, with a protective certainty that surprised even him. His voice was controlled, but every syllable carried authority that cut through the whispers. "For anyone who is confused," Ethan said, facing the guests, "let me make something very clear." He placed one hand gently behind Lily, shielding her from the curious stares. Lily did not deceive anyone. She did not manipulate her way into this marriage. She made a decision out of loyalty to her family, a loyalty most people in this room would not even begin to understand. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ethan continued, steady and unshakable. What she did was an act of devotion, not desperation, and certainly not ambition. He glanced toward the investors who had earlier questioned her background. Their expressions shifted, uncomfortable under the weight of his words. And for anyone wondering, Ethan added, "Her past does not diminish her place in this family. Not today. Not ever." Lily's breath caught. Her eyes widened with disbelief, because he was defending her so fiercely, without hesitation, in front of the very people who could influence his entire future. Marcus, who lingered near the back of the hall, scoffed loudly. "So this is what it becomes, Ethan. You are willing to risk your position for her." Ethan turned his head slowly. "Yes," he said. "I am." Marcus's smirk disappeared. Ethan looked back at Lily, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You do not owe anyone an apology, least of all me." Her eyes filled with tears that she blinked back quickly. "I never wanted you to find out like this." "I know," Ethan replied, "and that is why it matters." Daniel exhaled shakily, guilt softening his expression. "Lily, I only wanted to help. I thought he deserved to know the truth." Ethan nodded once. "He does, and now I do." He gently extended his arm to Lily. "Come with me." She hesitated for a moment, then slipped her hand into his. The tremor in her fingers eased the moment he held her. Together they walked toward a quieter corner of the hall, away from the whispers and judging eyes. But something had changed. The contract no longer felt like a cage. The distance between them no longer felt cold. And the emotion stirring in Ethan's chest was no longer something he could ignore. Part 9 will begin with the private moment that follows the moment Ethan chooses what their marriage will become, and Lily finally learns whether she is walking beside a partner or a stranger.